I'm 94 years old, and I signed away $250,000 to my son 3 winters ago. I thought I was securing his future. What I was really doing, though I didn't admit it then, was trying to secure my place in it. At 94, you don't wake up expecting many more springs. The mornings come slower. The light feels thinner. I sit at the edge of my bed and take stock of what still moves without pain. I count pills into a little plastic cup. I listen to the house settle. It's quiet here. I used to think quiet meant peace. Now it just means there's no one left to argue with. The money wasn't sudden. It wasn't a lottery win or some foolish gamble. It was the slow accumulation of a lifetime. 42 years at the same manufacturing plant. Overtime shifts when the boys were small. Missed weekends. A pension that turned out better than I expected. I saved because that's what men like me were taught to do. You don't spend what you might need later. I grew up during the tail end of the Depression. My father kept cash in a coffee tin above the refrigerator. He didn't trust banks. He didn't trust promises. He trusted what he could hold. When he died, we found $700 in that tin. It felt like treasure. I carried that feeling with me. I married at 23. My wife, Eleanor, was 19. She had a laugh that came out of her nose when she tried to hold it in. I can still hear it if I close my eyes. We rented a small brick house near the plant. 2 bedrooms. A yard just big enough for a swing set we bought used from a neighbor. Our son Daniel was born when I was 26. I remember standing in the hospital hallway looking through the glass at him. He was red and angry and loud. I felt something shift inside me. Not joy exactly. Responsibility. A weight that felt permanent. From then on, everything was about providing. I didn't miss his birth, but I missed a lot after that. First steps happened while I was on a night shift. School plays where I sat in the back row checking my watch because I had to be up at 4. Baseball games where I clapped but didn't really watch because my mind was already at work the next morning. I told myself there would be more games. There's always another season when you're 35. Daniel grew into a quiet boy. Not shy, just careful. He watched people before he spoke. Eleanor said he got that from me. I'm not sure that was a compliment. He was good with numbers. Better than I ever was. By high school he was talking about business, about investments, words that sounded foreign in our kitchen. I didn't understand the details, but I understood ambition. I admired it. When he left for college, I stood in his empty room and felt proud. That's the word I used. Proud. But the room felt smaller without his desk, without the stack of comic books by the bed. Eleanor cried that night. I told her it was the natural order of things. Children leave. That's success. I believed that. Daniel did well. He moved to another state after graduation. Said there were better opportunities. We hugged in the driveway before he drove off in a car that cost more than our first house deposit. I remember thinking he was already living in a different world. He called every Sunday at first, then every other Sunday. Then sometimes he'd text instead. Eleanor kept track of those calls in her head. She never complained, not outright, but I'd catch her looking at the phone on the kitchen counter like it was a stubborn appliance that wouldn't work when she needed it. We visited a few times, flew out for holidays. His apartment had glass walls and a view of other glass buildings. I didn't know where to put my coat. I felt like I was walking on someone else's floor, careful not to scratch it. He talked about markets and clients and deals. I nodded. I told him I was proud. When Eleanor got sick, Daniel came home for a week. It was lung cancer. They said it like it was a routine repair job, as if we could schedule it and be done. She grew thinner by the month. Her laugh disappeared first, then her appetite. I slept in a chair beside her hospital bed and listened to the machines breathe for her. Daniel stood on the other side of that bed, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. He had meetings he needed to get back to. I told him to go. I said we were fine. We were not fine. She died on a Tuesday morning. The sun was coming through the blinds in thin stripes across her blanket. I held her hand and told her it was all right to rest. I don't know if she heard me. After the funeral, the house felt enormous. Every room echoed. Daniel stayed 3 days. We sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee that tasted like nothing. We talked about practical things, the will, the house, my pension. He said I should consider downsizing. He said I shouldn't be alone. I said I wasn't alone. I had my routines. He left on a Friday. I watched his car disappear down the street. I stood there longer than necessary, waiting for something I couldn't name. The savings account grew after Eleanor died. I had fewer expenses, no trips, no dinners out. I clipped coupons even when I didn't need to. Old habits. Daniel's career climbed, promotions, a larger condo, then a house in the suburbs with a yard bigger than ours ever was. He married a woman named Claire. She was polite, efficient. I liked her, though I never felt she understood where I came from. They had 2 children. I saw them on video calls more than in person. The screen would freeze sometimes, and I'd be left staring at a pixelated smile. When Daniel called about the business opportunity, it was late afternoon here. He sounded excited in a way I hadn't heard since he was a boy explaining a science project. He said he had a chance to invest in a partnership. He needed capital to secure his share. He said it was solid. He'd done the research. He didn't ask outright at first. He mentioned that traditional loans were complicated, that banks moved slowly, that family could move quickly. I sat in my recliner and listened. My heart beat faster than it had in months. $250,000. That was the figure he circled around before saying it clearly. It was nearly everything I had outside the house. I told him I'd think about it. That night I walked through each room of the house, touched the back of the dining chairs, stood in our bedroom doorway. I asked Eleanor out loud what she would do. The house didn't answer. I thought about all the years I'd worked overtime so Daniel wouldn't have to. I thought about the pride in his voice. I thought about how rarely he called now unless there was something specific to discuss. I told myself this was my chance to be useful again, to be needed. When I signed the papers at the bank, my hand trembled. The young clerk called me sir and explained the transfer twice. I nodded like I understood more than I did. The account balance dropped to a number I hadn't seen since my 40s. Daniel thanked me. He said I was giving him freedom. He said he'd make me proud. For a while, he called more often. Updates about the partnership, early successes. I listened carefully, trying to follow the details. I told him I trusted him. Months passed. The calls thinned again. When I asked about visiting, he said the kids were busy with school. Claire had obligations. The guest room was being renovated. There was always a reason, and none of them sounded cruel. Just practical. The investment did well from what I gathered. Daniel's house grew larger in photos. There was a new car in the driveway, a vacation home mentioned in passing. I waited for him to say something about paying me back. Not because I needed it immediately, but because I wanted to know it was still mine in some invisible way. He never mentioned repayment. I told myself that I hadn't given it as a loan. Not formally. There was no contract beyond the transfer. Just trust. Still, I began to feel something shift. Last year I fell in the kitchen. Nothing dramatic, just my foot catching the edge of the rug. I lay there for nearly an hour before I could reach the phone. The ambulance ride was short but humiliating. In the hospital room, under fluorescent lights, I realized how small my world had become. Daniel came 2 days later. He stood by the window, looking older than I remembered. He talked about arranging in-home care, about selling the house. He said it wasn't safe for me here alone. I asked him quietly if I could stay with him for a while instead. He hesitated, just for a second, but I saw it. Claire's parents were already planning to move in, he explained. The children's routines would be disrupted. There wasn't space. Not really. He said we'd find a good facility nearby. A good facility. That's where I live now. It's clean. The staff are kind. There's a courtyard with a bench where I sit when the weather allows. I've met other men who tell similar stories in softer voices. We compare medications instead of ambitions. Daniel visits on holidays, sometimes on a Sunday if his schedule opens up. He brings the children. They're taller each time. They hug me carefully, as if I might break. He pays the monthly fees without complaint. I know he can afford it. But I understand now that money moves differently than time. The $250,000 bought him opportunity. It bought him expansion. It bought him a life that no longer has room for me. I don't blame him in the loud way people expect. He's not cruel. He's busy. He believes he's doing right by me. And maybe he is, in his way. What I lost wasn't just the savings. It was the illusion that sacrifice guarantees closeness. I thought if I kept giving, the circle would stay tight, that if I proved my usefulness, I wouldn't become a memory filed away between obligations. I see now that relationships don't operate like accounts. You can't deposit enough to ensure a return. If I'm honest, the distance didn't begin with that transfer. It began decades earlier. In the evenings, I chose overtime instead of sitting at the dinner table. In the way I praised achievement more than presence. In the way I told him to chase opportunities wherever they led. He listened. He learned to prioritize forward motion. I taught him that. So when he moved forward without me, he was only doing what I modeled. I sometimes imagine what would have happened if I'd kept the money. If I'd said no, maybe there would have been tension. Maybe he would have found another way. Maybe nothing would have changed at all. That's the hard part. I don't know. What I do know is that when I look at my hands now, they're thin and spotted. They don't have much left to offer. I can't fix a roof. I can't lift a grandchild high in the air. I can't even walk to the corner store without resting. All I have are memories and a small drawer of personal things beside my bed. Eleanor's wedding ring sits there. I twist it between my fingers at night. If she were here, she'd probably tell me not to be so hard on myself. She'd say we did the best we could with what we knew. Maybe that's true. But I wish I had known that usefulness fades and love needs something sturdier than provision. I wish I had understood that saying yes to everything can sometimes mean saying goodbye to something you didn't mean to lose. If you're listening to me, I'm not asking you to refuse your children. I'm not telling you to guard your money like my father did with his coffee tin. I'm only saying that time is the only currency that doesn't replenish. I spent most of mine earning. Then I spent what was left trying to remain necessary. Now I measure my days by the sound of the lunch cart in the hallway and the angle of the sun on the courtyard bench. Daniel will visit next month for my birthday. 95 if I make it. He mentioned bringing a cake. The children will sing. I will smile for photographs. And then they will leave before dark because the drive is long. I will sit in this small room and think about a brick house with a used swing set, about a woman whose laugh filled the kitchen, about a boy who once looked at me like I was the center of his world. I don't regret loving him. I don't even regret helping him. I just regret believing that money could hold us together. At 94, you learn that some gifts are too large. They shift the balance in ways you can't correct. I don't have many years left. Maybe not even many months. I feel that in my bones when the weather changes. I'm not angry anymore. That took energy I don't have. I'm simply aware that I mistook provision for presence, that I thought there would always be another season to sit in the stands and just watch without checking the time. There isn't. When the nurse turns off the lights each night, I lie in the dark and listen to my own breathing. It's steady for now. I think about the coffee tin above my father's refrigerator, how he saved out of fear. I saved out of love. In the end, both of us were trying to hold on to something that doesn't stay. If I have any comfort, it's this. Daniel is safe. His children are safe. They will not know the hunger my father knew. Maybe that's enough. The rest, the closeness, the easy conversations, the feeling of being essential, those things were never guaranteed. I just assumed they were. That assumption cost me more than $250,000. It cost me the understanding that love has to be practiced in the present, not invested for later. Now there is no later. There is just this room, this quiet, and the slow ticking of a clock I can't see but always hear. I'm 94 years old, and this is what I've finally allowed myself to say out loud.